Hello, we're going to cover Chapter 5. Chapter 5 deals with students and their motivation to learn and how you play a part in facilitating that motivation to learn. So important chapter. It's kind of a cut and dry, easy to get to, easy to get through chapter, but it's very important in this whole scheme of classroom management. So the first slide, again, we're on chapter 5 in your textbook, and we're on page 129. The chapter starts off by talking about um, students who students who need extra help as far as being motivated. All of our students are not going to come to school eager to learn and ready to learn and be motivated. Matter of fact, those are few and far between. So it's our responsibility to make sure that students are motivated. And I don't mean be a cheerleader every single day, but I do mean in order to be a good classroom manager, you have to be a good teacher. You have to deliver good instruction. You have to constantly be sharpening your skills and developing new ways to reach students. And that's a little bit about what this chapter is. The link between uh, effective classroom management and student motivation is a very strong one. And it's important for you to know this link. Oftentimes, when we talk about classroom management, students just think it's how well we handle or how well we react to student behaviors, and that's not necessarily true. Classroom management, we always want to be proactive and we want to prevent classroom disruptions rather than be reactive to classroom disruptions that are happening. So we want to prevent those classroom disruptions, or at least minimize those classroom disruptions. And Chapter 5 talks about one key way that we can minimize those disruptions, and that's by motivating students to learn. The textbook the whole chapter goes through 12 academic needs. So 12 student academic needs are outlined. And so we're going to take each one of these and I'm going to very briefly hit on them. It is your responsibility to go through the book and read specifically how to target these academic needs. The first academic need, number one, is for the student to understand the learning goals. And we start these on page 131. It starts off by giving a description of these academic needs on 132. The very first one is discussed. And answering that question that students have, why do we need to learn this? Um, when am I ever going to use this again? And we've all wondered those types of things. Why are we doing this? So we want students first and foremost to understand what our goals are by the lesson that we're presenting or by the concept that we're trying to teach. So students want to know that there's value behind what they're learning. So validate that and meet that need for the students. The second one is also on page 132, comprehend the learning process. In order to help students better grasp the learning process, it's helpful to assist students in developing several key concepts related to learning. And so on page 132 and 133, it goes into some detail about teaching students how to study effectively. And we're all college students now, and so we understand by this time, it's called metacognition. We understand the way that we learn. Some of us learn better taking notes. Some of us are audio learners. Some of us are visual learners. So we want to make sure that we teach students the best way that they can learn. That goes on to page 134. Academic need number 3 is addressed on page 134. Actively engage in the learning process. This one is very, very important. Even though your book talks about, even though that we can't meet this academic need, student motivation and achievement will be enhanced by actively involving students in the learning process. Again, think about yourself. And think about you going through your education K through 12. Think about yourself in higher education. And think about how many times you disconnect from the learning process. It could be during a lecture. It could be during this lecture. It could be during any of your classes. And then compare that to how you actively, what you learn when you are actively engaged in the learning process. And you'll start to realize that when you're actively engaged in the learning process, you don't have time to disrupt your neighbor. You don't have time to be off topic. When you're actively engaged, that means that you're interested and you're motivated in learning more about what is being presented. So we want to make sure that we actively engage those students. And there's some information there about regarding Black and Hispanic children and how well they respond to being actively engaged in the learning process. So really interesting information with that one. Academic need number 4 is addressed on page 138. Relate learning goals to individual interests and choices. This is something that's really important, and it's relatively easy to do. You want to first of all learn about your students. You want to know everything there is to know about their interests and their likes and their dislikes and their strengths, because when you start teaching, you want to tie your learning goals to their interests. And you can do this by maybe doing an interest inventory at the very beginning of the year. Your book talks about some interesting ways on getting to know your students and how important that is. We've already talked about building those student-teacher relationships. This is where it comes in really handy. You want to make sure that you relate what you're teaching to their real life, to their interest. And so the book talks about on page 138, 139, starting on page 140, how the different methods that they provide, that the book provides in relating those learning goals to their individual interests. And so this is one of my favorite academic needs because it's so rewarding to see the benefits of that, to see the looks on the students' faces when maybe you're going over a word problem in class and it has to do with 2 plus 2, and maybe say something like, I saw Amy in the game the other day, and her 2 baskets that she scored in her basketball game plus 2 more equals how many baskets. So tie in things that they're interested in, things that they do well, to what you're teaching or what you're presenting. So make sure you read through all of those different methods to reach that learning need. The next one, the academic need number 5, which is obtain instruction responsive to their learning styles and their learning strengths. Those of you that know me know that this is actually one of my, one of the areas that we really try to reach, especially with our special needs students. And getting to know your students again and their learning styles. On page 146, there are some methods that they begin talking about in order to develop that instruction that's responsive to their personal learning style. So you definitely want to read through page 146 and 147. Empowering the student and being responsive to the student. So don't be one of those teachers that are so rigid and reluctant to find out and teach to the needs of your student. That is good teaching, and you'll reap the rewards for that, because when you teach responsively to your students, they're going to be more engaged. And what happens when our students are more engaged and more motivated? They're less likely to disrupt the classroom. So it all comes back to student motivation tied to classroom disruptions and classroom management. The next one, academic need number 6, see learning modeled by adults as an exciting and rewarding process. And so that's on page 150, that's addressed, and that's basically, in a nutshell, what it's saying is that students are going to model your enthusiasm. Students are going to take their cues from you. If you say, oh, we got to cover linear equations this week. Oh, I hate linear equations. I can't wait till we can move on to something else. That automatically they go into that with a preconceived notion, well, the teacher doesn't like them, so they must be really hard, or they must really be a pain. So make sure that you always try to act as enthusiastically as you can about the lessons, about the day, about guest speakers, about whatever is going on at your school, and be supportive of that, because your students are going to model that, and we want them modeling the best behaviors that they can. Academic need number 7, experience success, and this is something that we all need. On page 151, we have a lot of students who very rarely experience success, and it is our job to make sure that they are successful in learning. one of those ways is to reach students using differentiated instruction. That's on page 151. So you need to read about differentiated instruction. If you don't know what that is, you need to know by the time that we end this chapter. That's developing instruction that meets the needs of all students, incorporates students' interests, and really individualizing student needs. Student instruction based on student needs, excuse me. Okay, academic need number 8. That starts on page 159. Integrating learning, so read through the top of page 159 about integrating learning and making sure that we develop those schemas. Tie that information to things that students already know. Tie that information to things that they will know in the future. And so that should be familiar to y'all that have taken those, several other education courses. We always want to tie new concepts to existing concepts, and we have better success at long-term memory when we do that. Academic need number 9 on page 159, receive realistic and immediate feedback. We've talked a little bit about feedback and how important that is. You know as students how important feedback is, so make sure that that's something that you don't skimp on with your students. It's discussed on page 159. 160, academic need 10, self-evaluation and learning and their learning and effort. That's on the top of page 60. Students, it's best to showcase students' learning and their effort, and this helps them be accountable and self-motivated. So let them see their progress either through data displays or charts or graphs or however, and let them monitor their own learning every once in a while. And this really promotes self-monitoring and self-awareness, and it allows them to get a better sense of exactly their effort in the part of their learning. So read on page 160 about self-evaluation, and then also on page 160, academic need 11, appropriate rewards for performance gain. Don't be afraid to reward good behavior. Don't be afraid to reward steps in the right direction, however small. And don't be afraid to reward behaviors that might be commonplace with other students, but maybe that's a big stride for that child. Maybe just walking down the hall with their hands behind their back, that's a rule that everybody's expected to do. However, when one student does it that has had difficulty with that task, reward them for that. So please read through page 160 and 161 for academic need 11. And then finally, academic need 12, participate in a safe, well-organized learning environment. Read through that and about how important it is to develop a classroom that is warm and safe and well organized. And students need this, and learning is optimized when you have a really good, well organized classroom. Good lighting, good ventilation, something that's supportive, because remember, we're getting students from all over, and we want to make sure that if they don't have a safe, well organized, clean, supportive home, that they can come to school and that's the best place that they stay all day long. So we want to make our classrooms the place where learning is encouraged, failure is supported, and overall a classroom that our students want to be in. So that's really important. And we all know classrooms, as we've gone through, the ones that we were just drawn to and the ones that we couldn't wait to get out of. So those are the 12 academic learning needs that I think are very important. Please read through that. The last couple of pages talks about special education. If you feel like you have, I know a lot of y'all have taken a special ed course from me, but if you feel like this is an area that you need some help on, please send me an email and I'd be happy to visit with you about special ed, IEPs, and those types of things. This is chapter 5. We will move on to chapter 6. Thank you.